At the most talked-about wedding of the year, a surprising animal crashes the ceremony, and with it a long-buried secret threatens to tear everything apart. Aspen Valley awoke under an intensely blue sky, the cool mountain air enveloping what everyone called the wedding of the year. At the Hartwell family mansion, perched atop a hill with a privileged view of the verdant fields, activity was frantic. Vendor vans came and went through the main gates, while staff adjusted the final details of the decoration in the spacious garden. Olivia Hartwell observed everything from her bedroom window, her reflection sharing space with the landscape in the antique glass. The wedding dress hanging near the closet seemed to watch her expectantly. Her fingers lightly brushed the pearl necklace that had belonged to her mother, the only piece she had managed to salvage after what happened to her parents. "Miss Olivia, the makeup artist, has arrived," announced Mrs. Cindy, entering the room with the familiarity of someone who had watched the young woman grow up. "Thank you, Cindy. Please ask her to come up." The housekeeper hesitated at the door, her attentive eyes catching something others wouldn't notice. "Is everything all right, my dear?" Olivia forced a smile. "Just nerves, that's normal, isn't it?" But it wasn't just nerves, it was the silence in the field that troubled her. The place where Blackie, the black buffalo her parents had raised with such care, always grazed in the mornings, was empty. That animal wasn't just an exotic mascot. It was a connection to the past, a silent guardian that had accompanied her since childhood. The makeup artist entered, bringing with her cases and professional smiles. While applying foundation to Olivia's face, she commented on the illustrious guests who were already beginning to arrive at the cathedral. Politicians, businessmen, celebrities. Everyone wanted to witness the union of the Hartwell conglomerate heiress with the promising entrepreneur, Connor Fraser. "Your groom is already at the church, you know," commented the makeup artist, adjusting the blush tone. "Seems anxious from what I heard." Olivia merely nodded, her thoughts wandering to the moment she met Connor just over a year ago at a business meeting organized by her uncle Albert. The young entrepreneur's charm had quickly won her over, and soon they were engaged. Perhaps too quickly, she thought now. That's when she noticed something unusual in her purse, open on the vanity. A small envelope she didn't recognize. With a discreet movement, she took it while the makeup artist was looking for another brush. Inside, a handwritten note in a script she didn't recognize. "Follow Blackie." Olivia's heart quickened. Someone knew about the buffalo, about her connection to it. But who and why? Downstairs in the garden, Vanessa, the wedding planner, organized the final details with military precision. Her earpiece constantly received and transmitted orders. Beside her, Brian, Connor's brother, supervised the champagne that would be served to the guests. "Any sign of the bride?" he asked, adjusting his tie. "Still getting ready. Everything on schedule," Vanessa responded dryly. Brian nodded, moving toward the house. His eyes scanned the imposing structure, pausing for a moment on Olivia's bedroom window. There was concern. In his gaze, something beyond the natural tension of a high-end wedding. At the cathedral, Connor checked his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. Next to him, Dr. Albert, Olivia's uncle and legal guardian, remained serene, almost disinterested. "Relax, my boy. Brides always run late," he remarked, patting his future nephew-in-law on the shoulder. "I'm not worried about delays," Connor replied, tense. "I just want everything to go according to plan." Albert smiled discreetly. "And it will, trust me." Back at the mansion, Olivia was ready. The ivory dress embraced her body elegantly. The delicate veil framed her face. She looked like the perfect bride, except for her eyes, which reflected more doubt than joy. Before descending the stairs, she approached the window once more, searching for any sign of Blackie in the fields. Only emptiness greeted her. The white limousine waited at the main entrance, decorated with white flower arrangements and silk ribbons. Mrs. Cindy helped Olivia accommodate the train of the dress as she entered the vehicle. "You look beautiful, my girl," said the housekeeper with tears in her eyes. Olivia held her wrinkled hands with affection. "Thank you for everything, Cindy, for always being here." The driver started the engine. The journey to St. Benedict's Cathedral would be short. Just 15 minutes. 15 minutes that, for Olivia, seemed to separate her from an irreversible destiny. What she didn't know was that destiny sometimes has its own plans. St. Benedict's Cathedral was resplendent. Colourful stained glass filtered the midday light, creating a mosaic of colours on the dark wooden pews. The choir positioned itself discreetly beside the altar, rehearsing the final notes of the Ave Maria that would accompany the bride's entrance. The guests, more than 300 people from American high society, occupied their places marked with small flower arrangements. Connor consulted his watch for the 10th time. His impeccably tailored Italian suit couldn't disguise the sweat that was beginning to bead on his forehead. Brian, his brother and best man, approached with 2 glasses of water. "Here," he offered, studying his brother's expression. "You look more nervous than you should be." "I'm fine," Connor responded dryly. "I just want to get this over with." Brian raised an eyebrow. Interesting choice of words for a man about to marry for love. Before Connor could respond, Dr. Albert approached, interrupting the conversation. His grey suit matched his perfectly trimmed grey hair, the erect posture of someone who commanded an empire. "The bride has just arrived," he announced, with a contained smile. "Get ready." At the church entrance, Olivia took a deep breath inside. The limousine, the dress, the shoes, the bouquet, everything perfect like in a fairy tale. But the feeling of alertness didn't leave her. The note remained folded inside her lace glove, pressed against her palm like a pulsing secret. When the car door opened, camera flashes greeted her. Selected journalists positioned themselves strategically to capture the moment. Mrs. Cindy adjusted, the veil one last time, her eyes conveying a silent message of support. Since Olivia no longer had a father to accompany her, it would be old Jack, the former ranch foreman and close friend of her parents, who would lead her down the aisle. "Ready, girl?" asked Jack, offering his arm, wrinkled by time and fieldwork. Olivia hesitated. The first notes of the wedding march began to sound inside the cathedral. It was now or never. "I am," she responded, intertwining her arm with his. The church doors opened completely. All the guests stood, turning to admire the bride. Olivia took the first step, then the second. The aisle, covered with white petals, seemed infinite. At the back near the altar, Connor watched her with a rehearsed smile. Beside him, Albert displayed an expression of contained triumph. That's when it happened. A deep, powerful sound came from outside the cathedral. A profound bellowing that made the guests in the last rows turn, confused. The choir hesitated for a moment but continued. Olivia, however, froze. She knew that sound. It was Blackie. The second bellow was stronger, closer. Murmurs began to spread among the guests. Vanessa, the wedding planner, moved quickly down the side aisle, whispering orders through the microphone concealed in her sleeve. "Keep walking," old Jack murmured, gently pulling Olivia's arm. But she couldn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the church doors, as if she could see through them. And then, with a crash that made some ladies scream, the doors violently swung open. There, occupying the entire doorway, stood Blackie. The immense black buffalo, with its lustrous coat and imposing horns, stared directly at Olivia. Around its neck, hanging from a leather strap, was a small bag that swayed with its heavy breathing. Chaos ensued. Guests rose in panic, some running for the side exits. The choir stopped completely. Photographers frantically fired flashes. Security moved towards the animal, but hesitated upon realizing its size. Connor advanced a few steps, his face contorted in fury. "Get that animal out of here," he shouted, gesturing to security. "Now!" But Olivia no longer heard him. Something inside her had awakened. With a delicate movement, she released herself from old Jack's arm and walked in the opposite direction, not toward the altar, but toward Blackie. The guests watched in absolute shock. "Olivia!" Albert's voice cut through the air. "What do you think you're doing?" She ignored him. Her mind was clear for the first time in months. As she approached the buffalo, it slightly lowered its head, as if in reverence. Olivia touched its moist muzzle, feeling the animal's warm breath against her hand. "Hello, old friend," she whispered. Carefully, she removed the bag hanging from the animal's neck. It was small, made of worn leather, with the initials HW engraved on the flap, Henry Hartwell, her father. Something told her that there, in that rustic bag, were answers she had been seeking for years. In a quick movement, Olivia grabbed the train of her dress and ran out of the church, passing through the perplexed crowd. Blackie turned, following her with heavy steps. Outside, to everyone's surprise, an old Jeep was waiting, engine running, with Mrs. Cindy at the wheel. "Get in." "Girl!" shouted the housekeeper. Without thinking twice, Olivia threw herself into the passenger seat. Blackie remained at the church entrance like a guardian, preventing anyone from following her. Inside the cathedral, chaos grew. Brian observed everything, with an enigmatic expression, while Connor and Albert shouted contradictory orders to security. The Jeep sped away, leaving behind the church, the guests, and the wedding that was supposed to seal much more than love. It was supposed to seal a silent agreement of power and greed. The Jeep bounced violently on the dirt road that cut through the rural properties of Aspen Valley. Olivia held onto the dashboard, while Mrs. Cindy drove with the determination of someone who knew every curve of that path. The wedding dress, once immaculate, now showed dust stains and small tears at the hem. "Where are we going, Cindy?" asked Olivia, still trying to process what she had just done. "To your father's old ranch," replied the housekeeper, keeping her eyes on the road. "It's the only place where we'll be safe for now." The Hartwell Ranch was almost 30 miles from the main mansion, hidden among century-old trees and surrounded by a small nature reserve. For years no one had visited the place, abandoned after what happened to her parents. "How did you know I would need to escape? And Blackie? How did he appear at the church?" Mrs. Cindy sighed, slowing down as they passed through a more rugged stretch. "Old Jack and I have suspected for some time that something wasn't right. Your uncle, the secret meetings with Connor." She paused as if choosing her words. "As for Blackie, it was Jack who found him last night. There was a man trying to sedate him in the fields." "Sedate him? But why?" "We think to remove him permanently. That animal knows too much, girl." Olivia frowned, confused. "What do you mean? He's just a buffalo." "A buffalo that your father trained to respond to specific commands. A buffalo that knows every inch of that property, including places your uncle doesn't want anyone to discover," Cindy replied enigmatically. The Jeep made a sharp turn, entering an almost invisible trail between tall trees. After a few minutes, a clearing opened, revealing a rustic wooden and stone construction, the ranch. It seemed frozen in time, with its dusty windows and the roof partially covered with moss. Old Jack waited on the porch, smoking a pipe. Next to him, to Olivia's surprise, was Brian, Connor's brother. His face displayed evident tension. "Did you get out without being followed?" he asked, quickly approaching the vehicle. "I think so," replied Mrs. Cindy, turning off the engine. "But they won't take long to find us." Olivia got out of the Jeep, suddenly feeling vulnerable. "What is he doing here?" she asked, pointing to Brian. "He's on our side, girl," explained old Jack, approaching with slow steps. "He's the one who discovered the documents." "What documents?" Brian gestured toward the house. "We'd better go inside. We don't have much time." The interior of the ranch was simple but welcoming. Solid wood antique furniture occupied the main room, along with worn rugs and dusty paintings. In one corner, a cold fireplace held ashes from years past. Brian headed to a coffee table where several papers were spread out. His normally relaxed countenance had given way to impressive seriousness. "6 months ago, I began to suspect my brother," he explained, organizing the documents. "Connor was never exactly a model of integrity in business, but he started acting even more suspiciously. Secret meetings, unscheduled trips, money appearing without explanation." "And what does that have to do with me?" asked Olivia, still suspicious. "Everything," replied Brian, handing her a folder. "Your uncle and my brother are in this together. They plan to take full control of Hartwell Enterprises. The marriage would just be the legal facade." Olivia opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were contracts, bank transfers, and a detailed map of the Hartwell property, with red markings in specific areas. "This is the nature reserve," she murmured, recognizing the location. "The area my father never wanted to exploit commercially. Old Jack approached, pointing to the map. It's not just a reserve, girl, it's one of the largest mineral water reserves in the state. And this, he pointed to another marked area, is where the main spring is located, exactly where Blackie always grazed. Mrs. Cindy placed a small kettle on the wood stove, which crackled in the kitchen corner. Your father discovered the spring 15 years ago, but instead of exploiting it commercially, he decided to preserve it. He created the ecotherapy project as a cover to keep the area protected. And how do you know all this? Questioned Olivia, increasingly perplexed. Your father told us, replied Old Jack. He knew he was taking risks. He left precise instructions about what to do if something happened to him and your mother. Brian intervened. I discovered this by chance. I heard Connor talking with your uncle about finally having access to the reserve after the wedding. I started investigating and found documents linking the two to offshore accounts and a mineral exploration company. Olivia sat heavily in a worn armchair, feeling the weight of those revelations. The leather bag that Blackie had carried was still in her lap, closed. And this? She asked, lifting the small bag. What's inside? Old Jack and Mrs. Cindy exchanged glances. We don't know, replied the foreman. Your father left it with specific instructions. If anything happens to me, give this to Olivia at the right time. With trembling fingers, Olivia opened the clasp of the bag. Inside was a flash drive, a small notebook with her father's handwriting and a sealed letter addressed to her. For my daughter, when you follow Blackie, she read aloud, feeling a lump in her throat. The silence that followed was interrupted by the distant sound of engines. Brian ran to the window, pushing aside the dusty curtain. We have company, he announced, tense, and it doesn't look like they've come for a friendly visit. Quick, through the back, ordered Old Jack, grabbing an old shotgun hanging on the wall. Noticing Olivia's alarmed look, he clarified, Just to scare them, girl, I've never shot anyone. Brian quickly extinguished all the lights, while Mrs. Cindy collected the scattered documents. The sound of vehicles approached, breaking the bucolic silence of the ranch. No, said Olivia, surprising everyone. I won't run. This property is mine. If they want to talk, let's talk. Old Jack shook his head in disapproval. This is no time for bravery, girl. Your uncle didn't come to have a dialogue. Even so, she insisted, removing her wedding veil and throwing it over a chair. If we keep running, we'll never have answers. The headlights illuminated the exterior grounds. 3 black SUVs parked in front of the ranch. From the first vehicle emerged Albert and Connor, followed by 2 robust-looking men whom Olivia recognized as part of the mansion's security team. Stay inside, Olivia recommended, straightening her disheveled dress. Let me receive them. Against the wishes of the others, Olivia walked to the porch. Night had fallen, and the yellowish light from the lantern hanging at the entrance cast long shadows on her face. Albert advanced a few steps, his expression oscillating between anger and fabricated concern. What an embarrassing spectacle, Olivia, he said, stopping at the foot of the stairs. Abandoning your own wedding, and why? Because of an animal. Connor remained a little distant, his eyes sparking with contained fury, his hands nervously opened and closed at his sides. It wasn't because of the animal, Uncle, replied Olivia, with a calmness she didn't know she possessed. It was because of what he brought me. She raised the small leather bag, observing how Albert's face momentarily paled. What's in there? He asked, trying to regain his composure. The truth, it seems, replied Olivia, about the water reserve, about the ecotherapy project, about what really happened to my parents. Connor took a step forward, his voice oscillating between plea and threat. Olivia, you're confused. This place, these people, he pointed to the ranch, are filling your head with fantasies. Let's go back to town. Talk civilly. It's too late for that, Connor, intervened Brian, appearing beside Olivia. She already knows everything. The shock on Connor's face upon seeing his brother there was evident. You, he murmured, incredulous, you're behind this? Albert assessed the situation with calculating eyes. The security guards waited only for a signal to advance. Let's be practical, said the uncle, regaining control. Regardless of what you think you know, Olivia, some things are irreversible. The companies have been under my administration for years. The board trusts me. As for the property, He made a comprehensive gesture. It's just a matter of time until I formalize the exploitation. Illegal exploitation, corrected Brian. I've already alerted the EPA and the Water Resources Board. They're watching you. Albert's expression darkened. He took 2 steps forward, climbing the first step of the porch. You don't know who you're messing with, young man. That's when a familiar sound cut through the night. A powerful bellow, followed by the noise of heavy hooves against the ground. Blackie emerged from the darkness of the lateral woods, his imposing black silhouette against the moonlight. The security guards instinctively retreated. Taking advantage of the distraction, Olivia quickly entered the ranch, followed by Brian. Old Jack locked the door, while Mrs. Cindy finished gathering the most important documents. We need to read. What my father left, said Olivia, opening the letter with trembling fingers. The handwriting was clearly Henry Hartwell's, firm and decisive as he had always been in life. The letter was dated 2 weeks before what happened to her parents. My dear Olivia, if you are reading this, it means my suspicions have been confirmed. Your uncle. Albert is not the man of integrity he pretends to be. I discovered that he has been making secret deals with mining and natural resource exploitation companies. Our property holds a treasure that many covet, one of the largest mineral water reserves in the country, with unique properties that make it extremely valuable. When I discovered the spring 15 years ago, I decided to protect it, not for the fortune it could generate, but for the responsibility it represents. Water is life, daughter, and life has no price. I created the ecotherapy project as a cover to keep the area preserved, and I brought Blackie, not as an exotic mascot, but as a guardian. He was trained to protect the spring, to recognize intruders, and more importantly, to guide you when necessary. On the flash drive that accompanies this letter, you will find all the evidence: contracts falsified by Albert, attempts to sabotage, the preservation project, and the plan to take full control of the business if something happened to me and your mother. Seek out Dr. Helen Morgan. She is the only lawyer I can trust. Give her these documents, and remember, true wealth is not in money or power. It is in the ability to do what is right, even when no one is watching. Trust old Jack and Mrs. Cindy. They know every detail of our contingency plan. With eternal love, your father. Silent tears ran down Olivia's face. Brian, reading over her shoulder, gently placed his hand on her arm. That explains a lot, he murmured, including why my brother approached you so quickly. Outside, the voices of Albert and Connor rose. Orders were shouted to the security guards, but no one dared approach Blackie, who remained motionless in front of the porch like a living statue. Old Jack pulled the curtain aside a few inches. They won't leave easily, he observed. And reinforcements will come soon. Olivia dried her tears, a new determination shining in her eyes. Then we can't stay here. We need to find this lawyer and show the world what my father discovered. Mrs. Cindy opened a trapdoor disguised under the living room rug. This way, she indicated. Your father built a passage that leads to the creek. From there we can reach the secondary road without being seen. As they prepared to leave, Brian checked the files on the flash drive through an old notebook computer he had found in a drawer. This is much bigger than we imagined, he said, with a grave expression. It's not just about the Water or Hartwell enterprises. It's about an entire network of corruption involving politicians and businessmen in the region. Your father discovered something enormous, Olivia. By the weak light of the lantern, Olivia observed her dirty and torn wedding dress. With a decisive gesture, she tore the voluminous hem, creating a shorter, more practical garment. Then let's do justice to his memory, she declared, taking the leather bag and the flash drive, and show everyone who Albert and Connor really are. The underground passage was narrow and damp. Olivia, now wearing a shirt borrowed from old Jack over her modified dress, led the group with a flashlight. Brian came right behind, carrying the backpack with the documents and the notebook. Mrs. Cindy and old Jack closed the line, moving with the surprising agility of those who knew that path well. My father built all this without anyone knowing? Asked Olivia. impressed with the structure of the tunnel, reinforced with wood and small metal beams. "Your Henry was always cautious," replied old Jack. "Said a prepared man is worth two. He built this passage when he began to suspect your uncle." The tunnel led to a small natural cave, whose exit was partially covered by dense bushes. Upon emerging, Olivia felt the cool night mountain air and the reassuring sound of running water. They were on the banks of a crystalline creek, at least a mile from the ranch. "And now, where do we go?" asked Brian, helping Mrs. Cindy out of the tunnel. "To town," replied Olivia. "We need to find this lawyer, Dr. Helen Morgan." "It won't be easy," commented old Jack. "Your uncle has probably already alerted the authorities. They must be looking for you throughout the region. And with the wedding scandal, the media must also be on alert," added Brian. "We need a safe place first." Mrs. Cindy adjusted the shawl over her shoulders, thoughtfully. "I know someone who can help us. My niece Julia has an inn in the most remote part of town. Discreet place, frequented more by artists than conventional tourists." They followed the creek bank for almost half an hour, until reaching a secondary dirt road. The full moon illuminated the path, dispensing with the need for the flashlight. Brian constantly checked his cell phone, but the signal was practically non-existent in that area. "We need to inform Dr. Helen about all this," said Olivia. "If my father trusted her, there must be a reason." "First, we need to reach the inn," replied old Jack. "Then we'll think about the next steps." The walk along the deserted road lasted almost 2 hours. When they finally sighted the first houses on the outskirts of Aspen Valley, it was already past midnight. The Art and Life Inn was at the end of a tree-lined street, an old mansion converted into a guest house with colorful walls and a lush garden. Julia, a woman of about 40, received the group through the back door. Her face expressed surprise upon recognizing Olivia, even with her disheveled appearance. "My God, you're the bride who ran away. It's on all the news." "We need your help, Julia," intervened Mrs. Cindy. "It's a matter of life or destruction." Inside the inn, in the cozy kitchen, Olivia and Brian briefly explained the situation. Julia listened with growing attention, her gaze alternating between incredulity and indignation. "So the wedding was just a facade for them to take control of the water reserve?" she asked, serving strong coffee to everyone. "And Hartwell Enterprises," added Brian. "My brother was always ambitious, but I never imagined he would go this far." Julia thought for a moment, drumming her fingers on the wooden table. "I have a journalist friend, trustworthy person, works for the Exposed Truth portal. He could help make this public." "No," Olivia cut in, "not yet. We need to speak with the lawyer my father mentioned first, do things within the law." "And how do we find this Dr. Helen?" asked Brian. The group was interrupted by the insistent ringing of the doorbell at the front door. Julia signaled for everyone to remain silent and headed to reception. Through the crack in the kitchen door, Olivia observed an elegant woman, approximately 50 years old, with short grey hair and discreet framed glasses. "I'm looking for Olivia Hartwell," said the woman with a firm voice. "I'm Helen Morgan." Olivia felt her heart race. How did the lawyer know she would be there? She exchanged quick glances with old Jack, who nodded discreetly after examining the visitor. "I am Olivia," she said, leaving the kitchen and facing the woman's penetrating gaze. Helen smiled slightly. "Finally we meet. Your father talked a lot about you. How did you know I would be here?" "I didn't know for certain," replied Helen, placing her folder on the reception counter. "But Henry left me precise instructions about what to do if Blackie ever appeared. In public, I had to improvise a bit, but Aspen Valley isn't that big and my contacts are good." Everyone returned to the kitchen, where Helen opened her folder, revealing methodically organized documents. "Your father approached me 5 years ago, concerned about some suspicious movements in the companies. He had discovered the water spring some years before and decided to preserve it, but your uncle had other plans." "Why did my father never tell me about this?" asked Olivia, with a touch of hurt. "To protect you," replied Helen, removing her glasses and calmly cleaning them. "The less you knew, the less danger you would be in." Brian was leafing through one of the documents with a concentrated expression. "This mentions a company called Aqua Vita Global," I know that name. Connor had frequent meetings with executives from that company. It's a multinational specialized in water resource exploitation, explained Helen. They have a bad reputation for dubious environmental practices in other countries. Albert had been secretly negotiating the concession of the spring area to them, using documents with forged signatures of Henry. "And what can we do now?" asked Olivia. "I'm sure my uncle is already moving heaven and earth to find me, probably inventing some story about my mental state." As if confirming her words, the television in the inn's living room, which was on at low volume, showed images of the interrupted wedding. The reporter narrated the incident with a sensationalist tone. Heiress Olivia Hartwell abandoned her own wedding after a buffalo invaded the ceremony. Sources close to the family reveal concern about her emotional state, fragile since the tragic accident that claimed her parents 5 years ago. Helen observed the report with a serious expression. "It's exactly as your father predicted. They're trying to publicly discredit you before you can expose the truth." "So what do we do?" insisted Brian. The lawyer put her glasses back on, a determined gleam in her eyes. "We counterattack, but we need to be strategic. We have evidence, but we need public opinion on our side." She turned to Olivia. "Did your father leave anything else with you? Something that Blackie brought?" Olivia handed over the flash drive and the notebook. Helen connected the device to her own laptop, and after navigating through the files for a few minutes, her face lit up. Here it is, the final piece of the puzzle. Water samples, chemical analyses, hydrographic maps, and most importantly, she clicked on a video file, your father's testimony. On the screen appeared the face of Henry Hartwell. Olivia felt tears forming again. There was her father speaking directly to her, as if he could foresee the future. Henry Hartwell's video had excellent quality, as if it had been recorded in a professional studio. His voice, firm and clear, filled the kitchen. "Olivia, my daughter, if you are watching this video, it means my suspicions have been confirmed. Your Uncle Albert is behind a conspiracy to take control of the companies, and mainly, the natural reserve we've protected for years. What makes this water so special is not just its exceptional purity, but its unique composition of minerals with scientifically proven medicinal properties." The camera pulled back, revealing that Henry was in a small improvised laboratory, with test tubes and modern equipment. These analyses, conducted discreetly by international laboratories, confirm our water contains a unique combination of elements that can revolutionize treatments for various health conditions. The ecotherapy project we started was never just a refuge for rescued animals. It was a cover to protect this natural treasure while we studied its properties without attracting unwanted attention. Henry picked up a document and showed it to the camera. Attached, you will find falsified contracts with my signature, authorizing the exploitation of the spring by companies linked to your uncle. The forgery is obvious to any expert, but he counted on my silence. What he doesn't know is that I registered all the data with an international notary under the custody of Dr. Helen Morgan. The video ended with Henry looking directly at the camera, his eyes conveying a mixture of determination and paternal love. "Trust Helen. She has the complete map of our plan. And remember, Blackie is not just an animal. He is the guardian of a legacy that belongs to humanity, not to greedy companies. I love you, daughter. Be brave." When the screen darkened, the silence in the kitchen was palpable. Olivia discreetly wiped away tears, seeing her father, hearing his voice, rekindled memories and strengthened her determination. "My father never told me about the medicinal properties of the water," she finally said. "It was confidential research," explained Helen. "Only a few people knew, including myself and Dr. Matthew Anderson, a researcher from Stanford who conducted the studies." "And where is this researcher now?" asked Brian. "Mysteriously disappeared 4 years ago," replied Helen. "Shortly after." "What happened to your parents, Olivia?" "Officially, he had traveled abroad for a conference. He never made contact again." Old Jack shook his head, his expression grave. "That's no coincidence." "What do you suggest, Dr. Helen?" asked Olivia. "We have evidence. We have my father's video. But how do we face my uncle's economic and political power? Helen closed the laptop, her face conveying calculated confidence. With strategy and precision, your uncle controls part of the local media and has influence with authorities, but he made mistakes. First, he didn't expect old Jack and Mrs. Cindy to protect Blackie. Second, he underestimated you, Olivia. And third, she looked at Brian, he didn't imagine that his accomplice's brother would be our ally. We need a concrete plan, insisted Brian. Connor is impulsive. When angry, he makes mistakes, and now he must be furious. Julia, who was listening attentively, intervened. My journalist friend, Raphael, works for an independent portal. He doesn't have the same commitments as traditional media. He could publish part of this information. Not yet, countered Helen. Premature disclosure would alert Albert and Connor. We need something more. Like what? Asked Olivia. A confession, replied the lawyer. We need to make one of them admit to the plan. With a confession, even partial, the documentary evidence carries more weight. Brian snapped his fingers, his eyes shining with an idea. I know my brother. I know how to pressure him. He's the weak link in this conspiracy. Albert is calculating, cold. Connor is passionate, easily provoked. It's dangerous, warned Mrs. Cindy. They must already be looking for you all over town. Helen checked her watch. It was almost 2 in the morning. We have until dawn to act. After that, the search will intensify. They're probably already monitoring hospitals, hotels, bus stations. And the buffalo? Asked Julia. What happened to him after you fled? Blackie knows the property paths better than anyone, replied old Jack. He must have returned to the spring. It's the place he always protected. Olivia stood up, a new energy emanating from her. The fatigue and initial shock gave way to determination. We need to return to the spring, she declared. If my father hid research on the water properties, there must be more documents there, something to complete the evidence we already have. It's risky, considered Helen. That area must be under surveillance. That's exactly why we need to go, Olivia countered. If they're so desperate to watch the place, it's because there's something there they fear we'll find. Brian nodded, agreeing with the reasoning. And I have an idea to distract Connor while we check the spring. I can arrange a meeting with him, pretending to be concerned or wanting to negotiate. It's an obvious trap, warned Helen. He wouldn't fall for it. He would if I offered something he really wants, replied Brian, looking significantly at the flash drive in Olivia's hands. A fake copy? Suggested old Jack, understanding the plan. Exactly. He would be so focused on obtaining the flash drive that he would become vulnerable. We could record the conversation, induce a confession. Helen considered the plan for a few moments. Risky, but it might work. We would need adequate equipment for the recording to be accepted as evidence. I have a friend who works with professional audio equipment, informed Julia. I can contact him right now. And Dr. Matthew? Asked Olivia. If he disappeared under suspicious circumstances, perhaps we should try to find him. I've tried for years, replied Helen. Without success, but... She briefly hesitated. There's something I haven't mentioned. I received an anonymous email 3 days ago with just one sentence. The water heals but also reveals. M.A. I believe it's from him, using the initials of his name. And what does it mean? Questioned Brian. I'm not sure, but it could be a clue. Matthew always spoke in codes when he suspected he was being monitored. Olivia closed her eyes for a moment, trying to connect the puzzle pieces. When she opened them, her expression had changed. The cave, she said suddenly. There's a small cave near the spring. My father used to take me there when I was a child. He said it was a magical place where the water told stories. It could be a hidden laboratory, suggested Helen. We need to check. Then it's decided, concluded Olivia. Brian distracts Connor while we check the cave. Julia gets the recording equipment. Dr. Helen prepares the legal documents to present to the proper authorities. Old Jack stood up, the experience of years of work reflected in his gaze. And we need reinforcements. I have contact with former farm employees who are loyal to your father, trustworthy men and women who can help us access the property without being detected. Mrs. Cindy served more coffee to everyone. the collective determination filling the environment. "Blackie guided us this far," she said with a slight smile. "Now, we need to complete the path." The first ray of sun was beginning to appear on the horizon when they finalized the details of the plan. The battle for truth and Henry Hartwell's legacy was just beginning, and time was not on their side. Dawn in Aspen Valley brought a typical mist that enveloped the mountains, creating an almost mystical scenery. Brian, wearing clothes borrowed from one of the inn's guests, adjusted the discreet microphone under his shirt. The recording equipment provided by Julia's friend was professional and almost imperceptible. "Are you sure it will work even with interference?" he asked Paul, the sound technician who was helping them. "Guaranteed. This system is used by the FBI in special operations," replied the man, checking the receiver. "It captures even whispers from 5 meters away." Helen reviewed the plan with everyone one last time. The inn's living room had been transformed into a kind of improvised headquarters, with maps spread out and notes everywhere. "Brian, you'll meet Connor at the downtown cafe at 9 o'clock. Keep him busy for at least an hour. Meanwhile, Olivia, Old Jack and I will investigate the cave near the spring." Olivia, now wearing jeans, hiking boots, and a plaid shirt borrowed from Julia, tied her hair in a practical ponytail. Beside her, a backpack containing original documents in waterproof compartments. "What if Connor doesn't show up alone?" questioned Brian. "He might bring security." "That's why we chose a public location," replied Helen. "He wouldn't risk a scene in one of the most frequented cafes in town." Mrs. Cindy brought mugs of hot tea for everyone, her face expressing maternal concern. "Be careful, children," she said, although the children were already adults in their 30s. "That property is not the same as you once knew." Old Jack managed to gather 4 former farm employees, informed Helen, pointing to the map. "They'll meet us here at the property line and guide us through secondary trails to the cave." The plan seemed solid, but everyone felt the weight of the risks involved. Brian would be the most exposed, directly confronting Connor. Olivia squeezed the arm of the brother-in-law she never officially had. "Thank you for doing this," she said with sincerity. "I know it's not easy to confront your own brother." "Connor stopped being the brother I knew a long time ago," replied Brian, adjusting his watch. "Besides, I need to correct this for myself. I ignored the signs for too long." At 8:30, the group split up. Brian left for the town center, while Olivia, Helen, and Old Jack exited through the back of the inn, where an old jeep was waiting for them. Mrs. Cindy and Julia would stay at the inn, coordinating communication through radios. The Corsage Mountain Cafe, located in the main square of Aspen Valley, was already busy when Brian arrived. He chose an external table, partially protected by a large umbrella, with a view of all entrances. He ordered an espresso and waited, discreetly checking if the recording equipment was working. At 9 o'clock sharp, Connor appeared, alone, as Brian had predicted, but visibly tense. He wore the same suit from the day before, now wrinkled, indicating a sleepless night. His red eyes and clenched jaw betrayed his emotional state. "I have 5 minutes," he said dryly, sitting across from his brother. "What's so important?" Brian remained calm, signaling for the waiter to bring another coffee. "Good to see you too, brother. Looks like you had a rough night." "Cut it out. What do you want, and why the hell are you helping that crazy woman? Do you have any idea of the scandal she caused?" Brian leaned slightly forward, lowering his voice to force Connor to come closer. "I know everything, Connor. About the plan with Albert, about the water reserve, about what happened to her parents." Connor's face momentarily paled, but he quickly regained his composure, looking around to make sure no one was listening. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know enough to destroy you both," Brian shot back, "but I'm here to negotiate." Connor let out a short laugh without humor. "Negotiate, and what do you think you have to offer?" Brian took from his pocket a flash drive identical to the original, but with edited content. "This, for example, all the evidence that Henry Hartwell gathered against you." Meanwhile, in the rural area of Aspen Valley, Old Jack's jeep advanced along secondary roads, avoiding the main routes. At the agreed point, they found 4 men waiting, former farm employees who had been fired by Albert after he took control of the property. Miss Olivia greeted the oldest of them, Anthony, with evident emotion. "It's like seeing your father return." "Thank you for coming," she replied, shaking the man's calloused hand. "We need your help to access the spring without being seen." Anthony nodded, pointing to the dense vegetation on the left. "They've placed security at the main entrance, but I know a path through the bamboo groves that no one else remembers. Your father used it to observe animals without frightening them." The group proceeded on foot, abandoning the jeep in a discreet clearing. The walk was difficult, with uneven terrain and dense vegetation, but everyone advanced with determination. After almost 40 minutes, they reached an elevation that offered a view of the valley where the spring was located. Old Jack used binoculars to observe the area. "Two men at the main entrance to the reserve," he informed. "They appear to be armed. And there's movement at the administrator's house," added Anthony, "probably their operations center." Helen analyzed the detailed map of the property. "The cave is east of the main spring, correct?" "Yes," confirmed Olivia, "hidden behind a rock formation. If you don't know exactly where to look, you'll walk right past it." The group diverted to an even narrower trail, practically invisible to those unfamiliar with the region. The smell of damp earth and dense vegetation filled the air. After another 20 minutes of careful walking, Anthony signaled for them to stop. "We're getting close. From here on, we need to be even more silent." Back at the cafe in the town center, the conversation between the brothers intensified. Connor examined the flash drive with suspicion. "How do I know this isn't a trap?" "You don't," replied Brian. "But you also can't risk ignoring what's inside. Henry Hartwell was smarter than you thought." Connor took a sip of coffee, his mind clearly working through the possibilities. "What do you want in exchange?" 15% of the Aquavita shares you'll receive for the exploration concession," replied Brian, keeping his tone low and firm. "And immunity when everything comes to light. You really think Albert will agree to this?" "Albert doesn't need to know. It would be our private agreement." Connor studied his brother for a few moments, the mistrust evident in his eyes. "Why?" "The sudden change. Yesterday you were playing hero alongside that crazy bride." Brian shrugged, feigning indifference. "I realized I'm on the wrong side of the equation. Why fight against it when I can benefit too? After all, we're brothers. And Olivia, where is she now?" "In a safe place, but she just lost her only copy of the evidence," replied Brian, pointing to the flash drive. "This is all she had against you." Connor smiled slightly, relaxing for the first time since he arrived. "I always knew you were smart, little brother, but I never imagined you were so pragmatic." "I learned from the best," Brian countered. "So, do we have a deal?" On the Hartwell property, the group finally reached the entrance to the cave. It was a narrow opening in the rock, partially covered by vegetation, just as Olivia had described. Old Jack and Anthony pushed aside the bushes, revealing the entrance. "I'll go first," offered Old Jack, turning on a powerful flashlight. The interior of the cave was surprisingly dry and well ventilated. After an initial tunnel of about 30 feet, it opened into a larger chamber, naturally illuminated by small cracks in the rocky ceiling. What surprised everyone, however, was finding the environment organized as a small rustic laboratory. Improvised benches with basic equipment, shelves with labeled samples, and a small diesel generator in a corner. "My God," whispered Olivia, amazed. Daddy really did have a secret laboratory here. Helen examined the notebooks left on one of the benches. "These are records of water analyses, dated until—" She suddenly stopped, her eyes widening. 3 weeks ago." "Impossible," replied Olivia. "My father couldn't have written that." "No, he couldn't have," agreed Helen, turning the notebook to show the handwriting. "Because it wasn't him who wrote it. I recognize this handwriting." Before she could continue, they heard a noise coming from the back of the cave. Everyone froze. Old Jack signaled for them to remain silent as he pointed the flashlight in the direction of the sound. For a moment, only the distant dripping of water echoed in the environment. Then, a figure emerged from the shadows. A man with a long, Unkempt beard, worn clothes and deep eyes that exhibited equal measures of fear and relief. "Dr. Matthew," whispered Helen, recognizing him despite his drastically altered appearance. "You took your time," he replied, with a voice hoarse from disuse. "I thought you'd never come." Olivia looked in astonishment at the man who, according to Helen, had disappeared years ago. The researcher who had worked with her father on the secret project. "You've been here all this time?" she asked, incredulous. Matthew approached slowly, like someone readapting their movements to human contact. "I had no choice. When I discovered what Albert planned to do with the spring, I began gathering evidence. But he found out. I had to fake my disappearance, or I would have met the same fate as your parents." A heavy silence fell over the group. Olivia felt her heart tighten. "And why continue the research here, alone, all these years?" "Because your father was right," replied Matthew, leading them deeper into the cave. "This water isn't just pure. It contains a unique mineral combination that has demonstrated extraordinary therapeutic properties in our tests, properties that could benefit thousands of people with accessible treatments." In a wider area of the cave, illuminated by small lamps powered by the generator, Matthew revealed shelves with dozens of catalogued samples and meticulously recorded experiment results. "Aquavita doesn't just want to commercially exploit the water," he explained. "They want the formulas we developed for medicinal applications, to patent them, to monopolize something that should be everyone's heritage." At the cafe in town, Connor finally made a decision. "All right, little brother, you've convinced me. 15% of the shares, but in your name. And I want guarantees that this flash drive is the only one." "It's the only one," confirmed Brian. "Now explain to me exactly how this scheme works. I need to know what I'm getting into." Connor hesitated, looking around again before leaning forward. "Albert forged documents transferring the exploitation rights to an Aquavita subsidiary. Our part would be 40% of the shares of this new company, plus a position on the board of directors." He took a sip of coffee before continuing. "But the real money is in the medicinal patents. Vicente's researchers discovered revolutionary applications." "And her parents?" pressed Brian carefully. "Was it really an accident?" Connor's face hardened. "Don't ask about what you don't need to know, Brian. Some things are better left in the past. I need to know everything if we're going to be partners in this," he insisted. Connor sighed, visibly irritated. It was Albert who handled that situation. Henry discovered the negotiations with Aquavita and threatened to expose everything. He became a problem. Albert simply resolved the problem. Brian felt a chill but maintained a neutral expression so as not to betray the ongoing recording. "And now with Olivia?" "Albert has everything under control. The official story is already circulating. Emotional stress, nervous breakdown during the wedding. In a few days, she'll be declared temporarily incapable of managing her assets. And if she continues to be a problem..." He left the sentence hanging, his cold gaze completing the meaning. 3 days later, the Aspen Valley Town Hall auditorium was packed. Journalists from national and international media competed for the best spots, while cameras broadcast live to the entire country. On the stage, a table with microphones awaited the participants of the press conference that promised to reveal the truth behind the wedding scandal, interrupted by a buffalo. Backstage, Olivia adjusted the navy blue blazer over her white blouse. Her look was sober and professional, strongly contrasting with the image of the bride in nervous breakdown that the tabloids had propagated in recent days. "Ready?" asked Helen, checking the documents organized in folders. "Never been more ready in my life," replied Olivia, taking a deep breath. Brian approached, accompanied by Dr. Matthew, who, after a bath, trimmed beard and proper clothes, was gradually returning to the appearance of the respected researcher he once was. "The recording of my conversation with Connor is secured as evidence," informed Brian. The federal judge issued search and seizure warrants for all of Albert's properties and Aquavita offices in the United States. "And our friends?" asked Olivia, referring to old Jack, Mrs. Cindy, and the former employees who had helped them. "In a safe place," assured Helen, and the federal prosecutor has guaranteed official protection for everyone involved. A town hall assistant approached, indicating it was time. The group exchanged determined looks before heading to the stage. As they entered, flashes fired. Incessantly. Olivia scanned the auditorium, noticing familiar faces among those present, some wedding guests, local businessmen, politicians. In one of the back rows, Albert observed with an impassive expression, accompanied by lawyers. Connor was not present. He had been preventively detained after the incriminating recording. Helen opened the press conference with a brief introduction, presenting each of the participants and the purpose of the meeting. When it was Olivia's turn to speak, the silence was absolute. She adjusted the microphone, her firm voice filling the auditorium. 5 years ago, I lost my parents in circumstances that were presented as a tragic accident. Since then, I've lived under the guardianship of my uncle, Albert Hartwell, trusting in his guidance and supposed good intentions. 3 days ago, I fled my own wedding after an unusual but providential intervention. Today, I'm here to reveal the truth behind these events. Olivia then explained in detail the conspiracy to take control of the water reserve and the medicinal properties discovered by her father and Dr. Matthew. She presented documents, evidence, the recording of Connor's confession, and finally, the video left by Henry Hartwell. The buffalo that interrupted my wedding wasn't just a disoriented animal, she explained. Blackie was trained by my father as a guardian of the spring and as a messenger in case of emergency. He fulfilled his mission, preventing me from sealing a union based on lies and betrayal. Dr. Matthew took the floor next, detailing his research and the importance of preserving the spring not just for its commercial value, but for its potential to develop accessible treatments for various health conditions. The water from this spring contains a unique mineral combination with therapeutic properties that can benefit thousands of people, he explained. Henry Hartwell didn't want to monopolize this discovery, but rather ensure it would be used for the common good. Brian was the next to speak, recounting how he discovered the conspiracy involving his own brother and Albert. During his testimony, there was movement at the back of the auditorium. Albert was discreetly rising, trying to leave without drawing attention. 2 federal agents positioned at the sides approached him, handing him a document. It was the preventive arrest warrant. The press conference continued for another hour, with journalists' questions being answered with transparency and precision. When it finally ended, Olivia felt a mixture of exhaustion and relief. The truth was exposed. There was no turning back. 6 months later, the Hartwell Ranch had been transformed. The old laboratory in the cave gave way to a modern and transparent research center, with scientists from various parts of the world working on developing therapeutic applications of the mineral water. The nature reserve had been officially transformed into an environmental preservation area with controlled access and educational programs for schools and universities. On an autumn afternoon, Olivia walked through the verdant fields accompanied by Brian. Their relationship, born amid crisis, had naturally flourished over the months of reconstruction. Not far from them, Blackie grazed peacefully, his black coat shining in the sun. Albert. "And Connor's trial starts next week," commented Brian, holding Olivia's hand as they walked. "Helen believes a conviction is certain, considering the volume of evidence." "I don't feel joy about this," confessed Olivia, "just the sensation that justice is being done." They approached the spring, now protected by a discreet structure that preserved its integrity while allowing scientific work. Old Jack supervised the installation of new environmental monitoring equipment, while Mrs. Cindy coordinated the kitchen of the newly inaugurated Visitors Center. Dr. Matthew, reintegrated into the scientific community with honors, chatted animatedly with a team of international researchers. Seeing Olivia, he smiled and waved. "The first formulations are ready for clinical trials," he informed her, approaching. "If the results are confirmed, we could offer accessible treatments for chronic inflammatory conditions in less than a year." "Father would be proud," replied Olivia, feeling that familiar mixture of longing and fulfillment. "Without a doubt," agreed Matthew. "His legacy lives through this work." As she observed the movement of the research center, Olivia reflected on the journey of the past few months. What had begun as a day that should have sealed her fate with a lie had transformed into the beginning of a new mission. The interrupted wedding didn't represent an end, but a new beginning. Brian intertwined his fingers with hers, sharing the moment of contemplation. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how unpredictable life is," she replied, smiling. 6 months ago, I was about to marry your brother in a luxurious ceremony that would seal a corrupt agreement. And now? Now I'm exactly where I should be, continuing the work my father began, protecting what truly matters. At the headquarters of the research center, a framed photograph of Henry and Mary Hartwell occupied a place of honor. Beside it, a discreet plaque displayed the phrase that had become the project's motto: "Water heals but also reveals." Blackie slowly approached the couple, his imposing presence contrasting with the gentleness of his movements. Olivia caressed the animal's muzzle, feeling a connection that transcended rational explanations. "Thank you for guiding me here, old friend," she whispered. The sun was beginning to set behind the mountains, painting the Aspen Valley sky with shades of orange and pink. A gentle breeze swayed the tall vegetation, creating golden waves in the fields. It was the end of a day, but also the continuation of a story that was just beginning. Olivia Hartwell, the heiress who almost lost everything, had rediscovered her true legacy, not in the company's or the family fortune, but in the mission to protect something much more valuable: truth and the common good. And in this unexpected journey, she had found not only justice for her parents, but also a greater purpose and genuine love. As they walked back to the headquarters, leaving Blackie grazing peacefully under the orange sky, Olivia knew that some stories don't end with happily ever after. Some merely transform, flowing like the water from the spring her father had worked so